Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be teaching you about how you can use shadow work to reach your goals by helping you overcome procrastination, self-sabotage, and really anything that holds you back from reaching your goals. Alright, so this video is all about how to use shadow work to overcome patterns like procrastination, self-sabotage, work avoidant behaviors, and really anything that holds you back from reaching your goals. And the reason why you want to use shadow work for this is because shadow work is about making the unconscious conscious. And oftentimes when we're throwing up all kinds of obstacles and barriers and we're avoiding the work that we really want to do, there's usually some kind of underlying unconscious reason why we're holding ourselves back. And if we approach these procrastination and work avoidance issues from a more surface level perspective, we might think, oh, I need to just have more willpower, or I need a time management schedule. But in actuality, there can be some deeper things going on that you can really only discover with deep inner work. So to give a metaphor to understand this a bit better, let's say that you trying to move forward toward your goals and to be productive, but dealing with things like procrastination, self-sabotage, and other types of work avoidant patterns is analogous to you trying to walk forward dragging a ball and chain behind you. But in this metaphor, you're not aware that you're actually dragging a ball and chain behind you because it's unconscious to you, because it's in the shadow. So of course, you would have to become aware of the ball and chain, and then you would have to figure out how to actually take that ball and chain off of you. And in order to do that, you have to engage in deep inner work to understand why that ball and chain was put on your ankle in the first place. And anytime you're experiencing patterns that hold you back from your goals, like the ball and chain in the metaphor, there's always some very important reason why you're engaging in that action or that pattern to begin with. And it usually serves some kind of protective function, but it can also serve you in other ways. And we're going to talk more about that later in the video, but first I want to go over some of the potential obstacles that you could run into that might be coming from the shadow. Well, for one, any kind of procrastination or work avoidance can be because of things that are happening in the unconscious, as well as if you want to start working on something and suddenly you feel sleepy out of nowhere. And this procrastination can even be quite sneaky and come in the form of productive procrastination, where you have to get something done over here, but then you're like, oh, maybe I should clean the house instead. You can also find yourself in a variety of different discouraging mindset patterns that can come about as a result of things going on in the shadow that hold you back from your goals. So ideas like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough to do this, or maybe I'm too young to do that, or I'm too old to do that. Or maybe a more existential belief like there's no point in doing anything at all. Or even a mindset like I'll always fail. You might also experience feelings of overwhelm and aversion when you're trying to do productive work toward your goals. Or you can even have some mindset blocks that keep you from becoming clear on what it is that you really want to do and the direction you really want to go in. And oftentimes when we lack clarity, we end up scattered and we end up procrastinating because we don't know what the next step is. And because of this lack of clarity, we might also lack motivation because we don't have an overarching trajectory that we're following. Or perhaps every time you sit down to do productive work toward your goals, it's like inner turmoil and you're in a fight with yourself about it. Or maybe it's the case that you're trying to set brand new habits and you keep finding yourself backsliding to specific types of habits. And oftentimes that can come from the shadow as well, if those original habits that you had serve some kind of function for you. And that's especially true if they were used to cope with something or to protect yourself from something. We can also experience patterns of distraction that hold us back from achieving our goals. And all of these patterns that I just described tend to come from what's unconscious to us, where we might have developed a certain mental, emotional, or behavioral pattern that holds us back from achieving our goals. Or sometimes the parts of ourself that have been put down into the shadow have a deeper awareness than we do and might tend to pull us off course if they know that we don't really want to go in the direction that we're trying to go in and that we consciously think that we want to go in. Now, before I teach you how to resolve these patterns that hold you back toward your goals, I want to give you a metaphor that I frequently use in my Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage program. By the way, if you wanted to learn more about that, there's a link down in the description box. And the metaphor that I like to use is one of a horse and a rider. And you want to imagine yourself as two beings in one, where you are both the rider and the horse. And the rider has an idea of a certain goal that the rider wants to achieve that's off in the distance. And the rider can't get there alone. The rider needs the horse in order to actually move in the direction of that goal. And the rider in this metaphor represents your conscious mind, and the horse represents your unconscious mind, your body, your instincts, and basically every other part of you that isn't your conscious mind. And so let's say you as the conscious personality, as the conscious mind, as the rider, go to the horse and say, hey, I want to start my own business, or hey, I want to get into this relationship, or hey, I want to write a book, or hey, I want to get a promotion at work. And so these are all the ideas that the human rider comes up with. And so let's narrow it down and say that the rider comes to the horse and says, hey, I want to write this book. And again, the rider has to get the horse to cooperate along the journey to actually go toward the end result of having written the book. And let's say that in this metaphor, things are at first all right, and maybe the first couple of miles, the rider is able to successfully ride the horse toward the destination of creating the book. And maybe in real life, that represents maybe writing the first few chapters. But then somewhere along the journey, maybe the rider tries to get the horse to move forward, and then all of a sudden the horse just stops and lays down and refuses to move forward. And in real life, this would be analogous to productivity halting, maybe more procrastinations coming up. Maybe you feel a sense of aversion every time you sit down to write the book. And one of the main things that's important to note about this is that whenever the horse is resisting, there is always a valid reason why the horse is resisting. So as the rider, we're like, oh my gosh, I want to be able to write that book. For some reason, I'm procrastinating. This is terrible. I need to force the horse into actually doing the writing through brute force of will. But this isn't a good idea because the horse has a valid reason for objecting to moving forward on that journey. And what your job is as the rider is to be able to attune to your horse, which is also you, to figure out what's the reason why the horse is objecting in the first place. And rest assured, it is never for no reason, and it is never just because the horse is trying to mess you over. If you are running into self-sabotage, procrastination, or anything that's halting your journey along the trajectory toward your goal, you always have a benevolent, self-interested intention behind that. That means you are always trying to protect or serve yourself in some way, even if your, let's say, sabotage mechanism is backfiring or creating all sorts of problems for you. And so if you are the rider and the horse, and you find that you're on the journey toward your goal and the horse is taking you to that journey and you're making good time, and then all of a sudden the horse stops, stalls out, starts to be aversive to the whole entire journey, starts to procrastinate, don't try to whip the horse and put more pressure on the horse to get it to go toward the journey. Instead, sit there, talk with the horse for a minute, figure out why is the horse objecting. And then once you actually know why, you can resolve that underlying reason why the horse is objecting. And you can do that by asking yourself, how am I trying to protect or serve myself by procrastinating on my goals? Or how am I trying to protect or serve myself by sabotaging my goals? Or how am I trying to protect or serve myself by avoiding work? Or even, how am I trying to protect or serve myself by going in the opposite direction from the direction I consciously want to go in? And if you want to use the metaphor, you can even say, how is the horse trying to protect or serve me by stalling out on the journey? And like I said, there's always an important reason. This is why it's important not to disregard your horse's objections and not to just use the whip to try to get the horse to move forward, with the whip representing extreme pressure and brute force of will. So I'm going to share with you some common reasons why people hold themselves back from their goals that I've seen many, many times over my career as a coach over the past 7 years. And I'm going to describe this using the metaphor of the horse and the rider. Let's say that Suzanne's goal is to start her own business, but her horse is sabotaging her journey and sort of laying down and not moving forward toward that goal and doing all sorts of procrastination because the horse is trying to protect her from exposure. Because maybe when Suzanne was a child, she would always get in trouble when she was on her parents' radar. And so she learned to keep herself small and hidden in order to avoid those negative consequences. Or let's say that Ethan has a deep underlying belief that he's an imposter and he wants to go into a particular kind of profession, but the horse stalls him out on his journey because the horse is trying to protect him from being exposed as a fraud or an imposter in front of everyone in his profession. Or let's say that Sherry has a deep unconscious underlying belief from childhood that if she makes any mistakes at all, that she's bad. And so the horse tries to protect her by holding her back from pursuing her goals in order to avoid failure. And this protects her from seeing herself as bad in accordance with that limiting belief. Or let's say that Jerome wants a promotion at work, but he finds himself constantly sabotaging that goal. Now, the horse is actually trying to protect him because when he was a child, he was made to feel responsible for all of the adults around him. All of their emotions were his responsibility as a very, very young child. And now he feels very overwhelmed with responsibility. And so because that promotion comes with more responsibility, the horse is trying to protect Jerome from feeling overwhelmed by that responsibility. Or let's say that Sandra really wants to get into a romantic relationship, but she finds herself always sabotaging these relationships. And ultimately, the horse is doing it because it's trying to protect her from experiencing the type of relationship that her parents had. And this fear of relationship meaning all kinds of negative things will come into her life. And more generally speaking, the horse is trying to prevent an earlier trauma from happening again, which is a really common pattern with the horse and its protection mechanisms. Or let's say that William has a goal to make more money and he has a strategy for doing so. He's going to start his own side business, but he finds himself procrastinating and holding himself back and just not working on the business. And ultimately, this is because the horse is trying to protect him because currently, right now, because he doesn't have a lot of money, he's having to live with roommates and carpool to work and do his laundry at a public laundromat because he can't afford his own washer and dryer, and he's having to work in a busy workplace around other people, and his conscious goals would actually move him in the opposite direction of connection. And so the horse is trying to protect him by keeping his needs for connection met in the status quo because he isn't consciously valuing those needs as he's getting them met more passively because he doesn't have his own money to live by himself and have his own washer and dryer and to not have to carpool to work. Or let's say that Priya wants to start her own YouTube channel where she wants to share all of the private details of her life, but she finds herself holding herself back and not starting the channel at all. And ultimately, this is because the horse is trying to protect her because she was about to go over one of her own boundaries, her need for privacy. And so consciously, she isn't aware of her need for privacy, but the horse knows, and the horse is holding her back because she needs more privacy than her goal is currently allotting for herself. Or let's say that Stuart really wants to be a public speaker, but he finds himself holding himself back because he's afraid of experiencing an intense emotion, like embarrassment that could come along with the pursuit or achievement of that goal. And so the horse is sabotaging him and holding him back from that goal via procrastination and other forms of self-sabotage in order to protect him from the intense emotion of embarrassment. And it's very common for the horse to want to sabotage conscious goals if it believes that an intense negative emotion is going to be associated with the pursuit or achievement of that goal. Now, these are just a handful of examples. Really, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I hope at this point you kind of get the pattern where in this metaphor of the horse and the rider comes up with the idea, and then as the rider and horse go along the journey, whereby the rider needs the horse to bring them to the destination, the horse can sometimes get spooked off or develop an aversion. And basically every time that's happening, the horse is throwing up an objection and is saying, whoa, this isn't safe, we need to resolve this. So every time that you run into procrastination, self-sabotage, work avoidant behavior, patterns where you're bringing yourself in the opposite direction that you actually consciously want to go in, with that, you have to understand that the horse is trying to protect or serve you in some way. And so what the horse is doing in these instances is throwing up an objection to you as the rider. And it is your job as the rider to listen to the horse, to understand the objection and where it's coming from, and to resolve that objection at the roots. Now, sometimes the horse will throw up workable objections, and other times the horse will throw up non-workable objections. What a workable objection is where there's some kind of internal pattern, some kind of mental, emotional, or behavioral block that can be resolved just by kind of figuring out what are the main discomforts that the horse is feeling. Is there an intense emotion that needs to be emotionally regulated through and faced with? Is there some kind of mindset block, some kind of mindset shift that needs to happen? Is there some kind of behavior that's maybe going over the boundaries of that horse? And maybe we can kind of approach our goal from a different vantage point. And so these are the workable objections that the horse brings up to the rider. Now, unworkable objections come from where the issue is with the goal itself, and the goal being misaligned from what it is that you really want. And when the horse starts to rebel from moving in the direction of something that you really don't want, that isn't aligned with your truest, deepest will, the horse is operating exactly as the horse should be operating. It should be trying to pull you off the track of that goal. There's a wisdom to it. And so what you actually have to change in this case is the goal itself. You have to tweak it around until it is aligned with you, or if the goal is actually totally misaligned, you have to choose a different goal. And when the horse throws up unworkable objections, it is somewhat uncommon, but oftentimes those are the most inconvenient things because we have to make big shifts with our trajectory in terms of like where we want to bring our life to. And we want to examine, how is it that I have come up with this misaligned goal in the first place? Was it a sense of, oh, I have to do this, or I'm supposed to do that, and we got so disconnected from what it is that we really want that we started moving in a direction that's totally misaligned? And unworkable objections from the horse are really not fun. Back when I was a high school teacher, in my second year of teaching, it really felt totally out of alignment, and I would try to sit down, I would try to grade papers, and I would run into so much inner turmoil and self-sabotage beyond anything that I had experienced before. And that's because a deeper part of me knew that this was not actually the path that I wanted to be on. And so that's actually how I came to be doing what I am currently doing and being a coach and making YouTube videos, because this just feels a lot more aligned. So unworkable objections from the horse can be difficult. Those are the things that can lead to big career changes or major shifts in your life's trajectory. But it's like ultimately at the end of that, it will be worth it because you'll be far more aligned than you were previously. So I wanted to first bring up an example of a workable objection that the horse in this metaphor might bring up. So let's say that Jimmy really wants to be a teacher, but he was conditioned to believe as a child that he's not intelligent enough to be a teacher or to do anything that requires book smarts. So this is an internal mental barrier to achieving his goal, and so it is workable. That means that if he shifts that belief, he can actually rescind the horse's objection. And ultimately, the horse is objecting because the horse is in a state of learned helplessness, where it truly believes that it cannot do that action because the belief, I'm not smart enough, has been solidified. So in order for the horse to rescind its objection, what conscious Jimmy would have to do is to be able to discover what function that belief serves in the first place. So basically, if he believes that he's not smart enough, in what ways is he trying to protect or serve himself by holding on to that belief? And maybe what he finds is that it prevents him from taking bold action and being confident, because whenever he was bold and confident as a child, it would come with judgment and chiding from his parents. So it became safer for him to just internalize the belief that he's not smart enough, so that he kind of polices himself from being too bold. And then he can start to ask layers deeper as well. So we could say, okay, well, if I were bold and I believed that I was intelligent and I just like put myself out there and I got criticism, what would be so bad about that? And maybe he finds that, maybe he would feel shame or, something of this nature. He feels like he wouldn't belong. And he can explore down and down and down until he figures out what does he need to do in order to feel safe and comfortable letting go of that belief. Now let me give you an example of an unworkable objection that comes from the horse. So let's say that Raquel comes from a family of doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And maybe it was the case that her family had some limiting limiting beliefs on her. Maybe it was kind of similar to Jimmy's situation where they just didn't believe that she was smart enough to become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And mind you, Raquel's interests have never been in that direction. Really, she would rather go into the arts or the humanities, or she would rather work with people. But because she wants to feel a sense of belonging in her family and she wants to prove them wrong that she is smart enough, what she decides to do is she decides to pursue a career as a doctor that she's not really even interested in doing. And all the way during her education, the horse is throwing up all kinds of objections, trying to throw her off the course. And yet she uses maybe brute force of will to continue to make herself show up to the classes and to get through everything. Not that she's not capable of doing it, but just that she really doesn't want to do it. And then when she finally becomes a doctor, she finds herself sabotaging herself at every single turn, and she finds herself not doing her charts, and she's slacking off on different things, and she just feels really exhausted in her life, and everything feels misaligned. And if she's been able to fight against the current of her self-sabotage this whole entire time and to eke past, it's actually a really negative position to be in, because now she's reliant on that job, her life is centered around that job, and also she's working with people, and there can be all kinds of mistakes that are self-sabotaging mechanisms, kind of put in our own way in order to sort of discourage us from continuing on with the misaligned path. So with these deeply misaligned goals, it is better to listen to the horse sooner rather than later, and to really be able to connect with what your truest, deepest will is, what you really want in your heart of hearts. So for example, Raquel in this particular hypothetical example, she didn't really want to be a doctor. She just wanted to fit in with her family, and she felt like that was the necessary thing to do that and to have to prove her worth to her family. Really, all she wanted was a sense of belonging. So if she were able to be self-honest and to detach from the outcome of proving herself to her family, she could actually pursue something that's a lot more aligned to her, like something in the arts and humanities or working with people. So it's very, very important for you to be able to answer the question, what do I really want? And oftentimes it requires shadow work to even know the answer to that, because oftentimes we are unconscious to what it is that we really want, especially if we're used to operating through shoulds and have-tos and, trying to match up to external standards that were set for us. So what Raquel would need to do in this case is to be able to recognize her internal sense of worthiness, to be able to let go of that need to redeem herself or prove herself in her parents' eyes, and to be able to bring her goals back into alignment with her truest, deepest will. All right, so to give a comprehensive look at the video, the first thing you want to do is to notice when you're procrastinating, when you're self-sabotaging, when you're holding yourself back from your goals, and you want to notice that it's the horse that's actually holding you back. So remember, you're both the horse and the rider. So the rider is like your conscious mind that comes up with the goals. The horse is the rest of you, the unconscious, the body, the instincts, all the whole 9 yards. And basically, whenever it is trying to hold you back through self-sabotage, there's always a very good reason for that. And so what you want to do is you want to notice when the horse is objecting, and to notice it as a valid objection. And once you come to an acceptance that the horse is bringing you a valid objection, you want to ask yourself, how is the horse trying to protect or serve me by holding me back from my conscious goals? Then once you answer that question, you want to determine whether it is a workable objection or an unworkable objection. So remember, workable objections are more internal objections that have to do with a particular mindset, emotion, or behavioral pattern that's active within you that can be shifted. And then an unworkable objection is where the goal itself is out of alignment with your truest, deepest will, because it's not actually what you really want. And so in this step of the process, you want to ask yourself if it's workable and more of an internal thing that can be shifted, or if it's unworkable and it has to do with the goal itself. Then if the horse's objection is workable, you want to go into a process of inquiry where you try to figure out why the horse is trying to protect or serve you that way in the first place. So if you have a mental, emotional, or behavioral block to something, you want to ask yourself, how am I trying to protect or serve myself by engaging in that mental, emotional, or behavioral block? And then you want to explore that deeper and deeper and deeper until you understand what's needed to resolve that block. So, for example, if I am trying to hold myself back from a goal of public speaking because I am afraid of feeling embarrassment, well, maybe it's the case that I actually need to just face into the feelings of embarrassment. Maybe I have some past experiences of embarrassment that I never processed through. And so maybe once I actually face with that and process that through in my inner work process, maybe it becomes not quite as scary to actually engage in the public speaking career. And then if it's an unworkable block, meaning the issue is with the goal itself and the goal is misaligned with you because it's not reflective of your truest, deepest will, what you want to do is to be able to let go of that goal and then to plan how to transition from where you currently are to actually bringing yourself more into alignment with your truest, deepest will, which is what you really want in your heart of hearts. Anyway, that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, give me a like down below and subscribe and leave me a comment down below. Also, if you would like to learn more about my program, Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage, this is for people with big goals and dreams who want to learn how to use shadow work to resolve the blocks and self-sabotaging behaviors that stand in the way of those goals and dreams. And so if that's something that you think you might be interested in, go ahead and click the link down below in the description box. And at that link, you can find all kinds of information about the program, as well as testimonials from past and current clients that I've worked with in Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage. And if you would like to learn more about the shadow, go ahead and click this link right here. And until next time, keep becoming more you.